If you want to check for a pulse, we did, but yeah, we don't need. We just put the light back on him just to confirm him. No, they don't. Our sergeant said if he's dead, to just leave it.
Hicks's final moments unfolded in a quiet parking lot. Nippy Hustle was taking steps from the store he poured his soul into, and Takeoff never realized that night out would be his last. Different paths, same silence afterward. But buried in the footage are details most people missed. XXXTentacion. Let's go back to June 2018 to arrive a motorsports dealership in Dayfield Beach, Florida. It was here that one of the most controversial and influential young artists of his generation would take his last breath at just 20 years old. He was born in 1998 in Plantation, Florida, to parents of Jamaican descent. His childhood was anything but stable. Financial struggle plagued his family constantly, and young Jassy found himself being raised primarily by his grandmother, while his mother worked tirelessly to make ends meet. The instability of his early years would come to define much of his music, raw, emotional, and deeply personal explorations of pain, depression, and alienation. He found his escape in music, uploading his first track, Vice City, to SoundCloud back in 2014 when he was just 16 years old. What set XXXTentacion apart from his peers was his remarkable musical versatility. He wasn't content to stay in one lane. Instead, he blended elements of emo, trap, rock, and R&B into a sound that was entirely his own. His 2017 album 17 became a cult phenomenon, resonating deeply with young listeners who saw their own struggles reflected in his lyrics. By 2018, XXXTentacion had become one of the most streamed artists in the world. His single Sad would eventually reach #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, though tragically, this milestone would come only after his death. On that fateful day in June, XXXTentacion had visited the Riva Motorsports dealership to shop for a motorcycle. What he didn't know was that he was being watched. Surveillance footage from the motorcycle dealership captures the horrifying sequence of events that followed. Suspects in a dark SUV blocked his BMW i8 as he attempted to leave the parking lot. Within moments, the 20-year-old was robbed of $50,000 in cash and shot multiple times. He was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital shortly thereafter. The footage is chilling in its clarity.
We're just going to put the light back on just to confirm.
Okay.
Just put the light back on.
Hey, let me just hold on. Let me just make sure. Probably. I can't get through.
Four suspects were eventually arrested and charged with his murder. The trial revealed that the killing was premeditated, that the suspect had followed XXXTentacion from his home that morning. His death sent shockwaves through the music industry and sparked an outpouring of grief from millions of fans worldwide. While XXXTentacion's death was marked by controversy and chaos, much like his short life, our next story is about an artist who represented the polar opposite. A man who had left the streets behind, was actively working to uplift his community when violence found him once again. Nippy Hustle. If XXXTentacion represented the raw, chaotic energy of a new generation, then Nippy Hustle represented something different entirely. A vision of redemption, of community upliftment, of turning pain into purpose. Hermes Joseph Asghedom was born in 1985 in Los Angeles, California. His father was an Eritrean immigrant, and his mother was African American. He grew up in the Crenshaw district, a neighborhood that would come to define not just his music, but his entire philosophy of life. As a young man, he became affiliated with the Roland 60s Crips, a decision that could have led him down a path of destruction. Instead, Nippy chose to use his experiences as fuel for something greater. He left gang life behind to focus on music and entrepreneurship, releasing influential mixtapes like the Bullets Ain't Got No Name series that established him as a voice for his community. But Nippy understood that music alone wasn't enough. He wanted to create real lasting change in Crenshaw. So he opened a Marathon clothing store not just as a business venture, but as a symbol of what was possible when you invested in your own neighborhood. His Grammy-nominated debut album Victory Lap, released in 2018, was a culmination of years of grinding and believing in himself when the industry wouldn't. The album highlighted his hustle mentality while also advocating for economic empowerment and self-determination within the black community. And then on March 31st, 2019, it all came crashing down. Nippy was standing outside his Marathon clothing store when a man named Eric Holder approached him. Multiple angles of surveillance footage from businesses surrounding the store captured what happened next. Holder walked up to Nippy, exchanged words with him, then pulled out a handgun and fired repeatedly. Nippy was shot at least 10 times. He was just 33 years old. The surveillance footage is devastating in its completeness. You can see the approach, the confrontation, the shooting, and the aftermath from multiple camera angles. The footage was used extensively in Eric Holder's trial, where he was eventually convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 60 years to life in prison. What made Nip's death especially tragic was the timing. He was on the verge of meeting with lapped officials to discuss ways to reduce gang violence in Los Angeles. He was working on a documentary about the life of Dr. Sebi. He was, by all accounts, a man who had escaped the streets and was now trying to lift others out with him. His memorial service filled the Staples Center with 21,000 mourners. A 25mm funeral procession wound through the streets of Los Angeles, passing through Crenshaw one final time. He was gone, but his marathon continues. Nipsey Hussle had escaped Chicago's violence as a young child when his family moved to Los Angeles. But our next artist never got that chance. King Van was born, raised, and forged in the fires of Chicago's South Side, where storytelling through drill music became his only way out. King Von Chicago has produced some of hip-hop's most influential voices, but it has also been marked by an epidemic of violence that has claimed far too many talented young artists. King Van was one of them. Devin Deacon Bennett was born in 1994 and raised in Alblet, officially known as Parkway Gardens, one of Chicago's most notorious housing projects on the South Side. The area was a stronghold for the Black Disciples gang, and violence was simply a fact of daily life. King Von became affiliated with the gang at a young age, and by the time he was in his late teens, he had already spent time incarcerated for various offenses. But it was during his time behind bars that something unexpected happened. King Von discovered a love for reading, particularly urban novels, that told stories similar to his own experiences on the streets. These books inspired him to try his hand at storytelling through rap, and what emerged was a remarkable talent for narrative. When he was released, he connected with fellow Chicago rapper Lil Durk, who signed him to his FF, Only the Family label. King Von's breakout track Crazy Story in 2018 showcased his gift for vivid cinematic storytelling. Lyrics that painted, pictures so detailed you could practically see the events unfolding before your eyes. His style became known as storytelling drill, a subgenre he practically invented. Songs like Took Her to the O went multi-platinum, and King Von seemed poised for superstardom. But on November 6, 2020, outside a hookah lounge in Atlanta, Georgia, a confrontation between members of his entourage and associates of rival rapper Quando Rondo escalated into gunfire. While there is no direct footage of the shooting widely available to the public, Bodycam footage released through FOIA requests shows a police response at the scene and the subsequent chaos at the hospital. King Von was shot multiple times and was transported to Grady Memorial Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at just 26 years old. The footage from the police response reveals the confusion and tragedy of that night. Officers trying to secure the scene while multiple shooting victims required attention. King Van's death sparked a massive outpouring of grief from fans and fellow artists. But it also reignited conversations about the violence that continues to plague the hip-hop community. King Van's story was one of a Chicago artist trying to escape through music. But he wasn't the only one. Our next artist, Young Dolph, also had roots in Chicago before moving to Memphis, where he would build an empire on his own terms and become a symbol of independence in an industry dominated by major labels. Young Dolph. If there was one word that defined Young Dolph's career, it was independence. In an industry dominated by major labels and corporate interests, Adolph Robert Thornton Jr. built his empire entirely on his own terms. Born in Chicago in 1985, but raised in Memphis, Tennessee, Young Dolph's early life was marked by instability. His parents struggled with addiction, so he was raised primarily by his grandmother in the Castelia Heights neighborhood of South Memphis. Those early experiences instilled in him a fierce independence and a determination to never rely on anyone else for his success. In 2010, he founded Paper Route Empire, his own independent record label. While other rappers were signing with major labels and accepting advances, Young Dolph was building his own infrastructure from the ground up. His series of mixtapes, including the high-class street music series, cultivated a devoted fan base who appreciated his authenticity and business acumen.
Oh my God. Damn, they just killed Dolph, y'all. Y'all see his arm hanging out the window? Bam!
The surveillance footage became a crucial piece of evidence in the subsequent investigation and trial. Additional angles released during court proceedings showed the suspect's getaway vehicle fleeing the scene. Two men, Justin Johnson and Cornelius Smith, were eventually arrested and charged with his murder. Young Dolph's death devastated Memphis. He had been one of the city's most prominent philanthropists, regularly giving back to his community through turkey giveaways at Thanksgiving and other charitable initiatives. His funeral procession drew thousands of Moors, and the intersection where Makita is located had become an informal memorial site where fans continued to pay their respects. Young Dolph built his career on fierce independence and self-reliance, qualities that were hard-won through a difficult childhood. Our next artist, PMBB Rock, shared that same struggle, having lost his father to murder when he was just a toddler and spending time in prison before finding his voice through music. PMBB Rock. The story of PMBB Rock is one of resilience cut tragically short. Born Rake Hashim Allen in 1991 in the Germantown neighborhood of Philadelphia, his childhood was marked by tragedy from the very beginning. When he was just 3 years old, his father was murdered, a loss that would cast a long shadow over his entire life. Growing up in poverty, PMB Rock turned to the streets, eventually serving time in prison on drug charges. But it was behind bars that he discovered his musical calling. He began honing his craft, a melodic style that blended rap and R&B in a way that set him apart from his Philadelphia peers. His influences were varied, ranging from Tupac to Drake, and his goal was always to make music that would stand the test of time. Upon his release, he dropped his debut mixtape in 2014 and quickly attracted attention from Atlantic Records, who signed him to a deal. His 2016 single, Selfish, became a breakthrough hit, showcasing his ability to craft emotionally resonant hooks while still maintaining street credibility. He collaborated with some of the biggest names in hip-hop and seemed destined for continued success. But on September 12, 2022, tragedy struck at Roscoe's House of Chicken and Waffles in Los Angeles. PMBB Rock was dining with his girlfriend when armed robbers entered the restaurant. Surveillance footage from inside the restaurant captured the robbery and shooting, the suspects demanding his jewelry, the confrontation that followed, and the gunshots that ended his life at just 30 years old. The footage became central to the subsequent investigation and prosecution of the suspects involved. What made this case particularly heartbreaking was the apparent randomness of it. A robbery gone wrong that claimed the life of a father, a partner, and an artist who had worked so hard to escape the violence of his past. PMBB Rock was a solo artist who carved out his own lane in the industry. But our next story is about an artist who was part of one of hip-hop's most successful groups. Takeoff Amigos had achieved the kind of mainstream success that most rappers only dream of, yet even that couldn't protect him from the violence that continues to plague the industry. Takeoff. When you think of Migos, you think of three voices working in perfect harmony: Quo, Offset, and Takeoff. For nearly 15 years, this family trio from Georgia dominated hip-hop with their triplet flow and anthemic hooks. And at the heart of their sound was Kershnik Kari Bull, known to the world as Takeoff. Born in 1994 in Lawrenceville, Georgia, Takeoff grew up in a tight-knit family unit that included his uncle Quavo and his cousin Offset. Music was always in their blood, and the three of them began rapping together in 2008, eventually forming Migos. Takeoff was particularly precocious. He was making beats by the 7th grade, already displaying the musical instincts that would later make him the group's most technically proficient member. Mygo's rise to superstardom was meteoric. Their 2016 single Bad and Burr reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, and their Culture series of albums became defining works of the late 2010s trap era. While Quavo often received the most public attention and Offset garnered tabloid headlines, Takeoff was widely considered the group's most skilled rapper, a technical master whose verses often stole the show. In 2022, Takeoff and Quavo released a collaborative album as a duo called Only Built for Infinity Links under the name UNK and Few, signaling a new chapter in their careers. But that chapter would be tragically brief. On November 1st, 2022, Takeoff and Quavo attended a private party at 810 Billiards and Bowling in Houston, Texas. In the early morning hours, an argument broke out during a dice game. Surveillance footage from outside the venue captures the moments leading up to the fatal shooting, the gathering crowd, the escalating tension, and then the eruption of gunfire that left Takeoff dead at just 28 years old. He was shot in the head and torso and was pronounced dead at the scene. The footage shows Takeoff as a bystander to the argument. He wasn't involved in the confrontation that led to the shooting. His death was widely seen as a senseless tragedy. A young man caught in the crossfire of a dispute he had nothing to do with. His funeral was held at State Farm Arena in Atlanta, where thousands gathered to mourn one of hip-hop's brightest stars. Takeoff's death was marked by its senselessness. He was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. But our next artist, Julio Fulio, lived his entire career in the crosshaze. His music was defined by ongoing feuds, and the violence that permeated his lyrics eventually caught up with him. Julio Fulio, Jacksonville, Florida, has developed its own distinctive hip-hop scene in recent years, one marked by raw street narratives and unfortunately by the violence that often accompanies them. Few artists embodied the scene more completely than Julio Fulio. Born Charles Andrew Jones II in 1998, Julio Fulio emerged from Jacksonville's hilltop neighborhood with a style of rap that was unflinchingly honest about the realities of street life. His music often referenced ongoing feuds, particularly with fellow Jacksonville rapper Young Gene, and his lyrics frequently touched on themes of paranoia, loss, and survival. His debut album, Life of Me, released in 2022, showcased his ability to channel the chaos of his environment into compelling music. He had built a devoted following who appreciated his authenticity, even as his beef-heavy approach made him a controversial figure. On June 23, 2024, just hours after celebrating his 26th birthday at a Tampa nightclub, Julio Fulio was ambushed in the parking lot of a Holiday Inn. Courtroom-released surveillance footage shows the horrifying attack. Suspect approaching his vehicle and opening fire in what can only be described as an execution-style hit. Additional surveillance angles revealed the coordination and planning that went into the ambush. Multiple suspects have been arrested in connection with his murder, and the case remains ongoing. Julio Fulio's death highlighted the ongoing violence that continues to plague Jacksonville's rap scene, a cycle of beefs and retaliations that has claimed far too many young lives. Julio Fulio's provocative approach to rap made him a controversial figure in Jacksonville. But he wasn't alone in that regard. Our next artist, YBC Doll from Philadelphia, earned the nickname Mr. Disrespectful for his willingness to directly call out rivals in his music, a boldness that would ultimately prove fatal. YBC Doll. Philadelphia has long been a breeding ground for rap talent. But in recent years, the city's drill scene has emerged as one of the most vibrant and dangerous in the country. YBC Doll was one of its rising stars. Born Abdul Vixes in 1999 in West Philadelphia, YBC Doll, the YBC standing for Young Bag Chasers, his crew made a name for himself through provocative street focus tracks that earned him the nickname Mr. Disrespectful. His lyrics pulled no punches, often directly addressing rivals and dissing opposing crews in the city's complex gang landscape. His bold approach won him a devoted following among fans of Philadelphia drill. But it also made him a target. The beef-heavy nature of the Philly scene meant that the lines between music and real-life conflict were often dangerously blurred. On August 30th, 2024, that blur became tragically real. YBC Doll was shot and killed in Philadelphia's only neighborhood. Newly released police surveillance footage captures the moments leading up to the shooting, including images of the suspect vehicle that was involved in the fatal attack. The footage has been used by investigators as they work to identify and apprehend those responsible for his death. YBC Daal was just 25 years old. Another young life cut short by the violence that continues to plague hip-hop streets. YBC Daal represented the East Coast drill movement that has emerged in recent years. But our next artist was a pioneer of an entirely different sound on the West Coast. Drow, the ruler, developed a style